performance, songs, poems, dances, welcome to share.
I had thought about leadership, and something that's been coming up for me over the past week or so. And one of the things that I was thinking of is just that leadership doesn't necessarily have to occur in the context of management at all, because it can be introducing an idea or taking an action in a situation that one doesn't ordinarily have any management over. But in particular, though, I was had an interesting experience of I serve on a small advisory council for something that's sort of loosely housed out of the University of Vermont. And so I'm technically somewhere on uvm.edu's webpage as a member of that committee. And so a parent called me, sort of totally out of the blue, and asked me a question about a kid with an adult with a disability and stuff. And I was like, well, I don't work here, really. And I have no authority over this situation at all. I'm surprised you're calling me. But I also felt compelled to listen to the situation and stuff too, because my role in that committee is related to disabilities too. And I sort of do serve a function in the community around that. And so I listened to the situation, gave my best sort of advice and let them go on. And then I sort of thought about the situation. I was like, well, I could possibly intervene in the situation a little bit too. And so I sort of had this sort of thing come up for me. It's like, well, maybe this is an opportunity for me to take leadership. And so I contacted the person who was the head of the department who was responsible in this situation. And because I felt like probably they hadn't really taken responsibility in the way that I would have hoped that they would have. And so it's just an interesting sort of interplay of just sort of asking questions and sort of seeing about sort of accountability in the situation of someone on the outside, but also someone who feels responsible, and figuring out what my boundaries were in that context. So in the end, I have another email sort of sitting on the pile of things to review, and do I want to send this, and how far do I want to challenge someone in a situation where I think they're just doing something fairly mediocre at best, and that maybe it could be harming people. But, so it's just something that sort of came up for me. And it's been a real struggle. Even something like that, when I am identified with an issue, and when I feel angry around a situation, and that kind of thing, it's a struggle for me to decide where to do something that might make someone else uncomfortable, even when I feel like there's very low probability of it negatively impacting me. So it's just an interesting sort of thing for me to observe with it.
Right. Huh. How do you feel about it now that it sounds like you're a few days afterwards?
Well, I'm a few days after the last interaction, but I haven't sent the email that I have sending in my drafts folder. And I feel kind of ambivalent about it. And I'm kind of afraid, I guess, and I'm kind of I partly just don't like my own feeling of negativity and my own feeling of sort of distrust and other things in the situation. And so because there's maybe even a certain hatred that I have, it's hard for me to act when I feel like I'm acting from that place, even when I feel like I'm using my best judgment about what serves the highest good in the situation.
Right. Yeah, it's very apropos. I'm hearing a few different threads. One is around leadership versus responsibility, official responsibility versus maybe also accountability. Noticing to what extent do we have to self-purify the hatred or negativity or bias or whatever we have in ourselves before we take action, or is that skillful action to still take action when we still notice that's happening inside ourselves? Also noticing the care and concern. That'd be very easy to say, well, this is not my official role. This is not my responsibility. I'm not accountable for this. Therefore, I don't have to do anything. This shouldn't be my issue. This shouldn't be where I lead. And yet, it sounds like you took the step of listening to this person and hearing them out and choosing to care and choosing to grapple with this leadership question now of is this skillful or not to act on, and how to act on it. Is that sort of accurate?
Yeah, very accurate.
Yeah. So I have a lot of sympathy for your position. And so I think in our culture, it's very normal for a lot of us, at least in this demographic of people, to more often, if I don't have the official role or accountability, then I won't do anything, because then I can't cause harm, and at the very least it shouldn't cause harm, so I won't do anything. I'll wait for an official thing where some leader tells me what I should do, like be at this protest, or write this letter or something. Or wait until I get power and I get the responsibility and accountability, so then I can tell other people what to do, and I'll be right because I'm the leader, and the leader's right. So therefore, I don't have to worry about hurting anyone because I'm right, because I'm the leader. Of course, that's all delusion, but that's how a lot of our minds see leadership. And if we're honest, we don't. It's true. I could have hatred in my heart. I could do something that I think is for compassion and actually end up causing harm. That's a possibility. That's why, at least at Maple, we talk about integrating wisdom, love, and power. That we could have, say, idiot compassion, where we really care about an issue, really care about someone. We might have some amount of power to actually do something about it, but it might not actually be the wise thing to do. It might not be the skillful thing to do. It might actually create more conflict or more problems. Or we could have a lot of power. We could even know what the right thing is, like the oil companies who knew global warming was happening for decades. And when they considered what do they really care about, they cared about their profit, they cared about themselves over everything else. They didn't have the love of caring about things that they don't identify with, that they're not attached to. But they knew for a fact their activity was destroying the planet. They had the power to do something different. And instead they created an intentional misinformation campaign to confuse everyone, just like tobacco companies did before that. And others of us could have, say, the wisdom and the love. I know the right thing to do. My heart is pure. based on compassion. And I have no power. I don't think I can do anything. I have to wait until I'm enlightened or perfect before I take action. Which is also a delusion. At least in this tradition. Other traditions might disagree. But, and so I don't have a ready pat answer for you, but as I said in my talk, or at least try to convey, that's the challenge of leadership. Is I don't know what the right thing to do is. Seems like maybe something should definitely happen, or maybe not. Who's willing to play and act in that area? It's not so different when we hit times in our meditation practice where this seems really important, but I don't know what I'm doing or what to do with this feeling or pain or energy or whatever's happening in my practice. Maybe I just need some book to tell me the answer, or some teacher to tell me the answer or something. Maybe I just need to wait until this changes or something. But in fact, in those times, what's really important is to take leadership, take ownership, which may or may not mean send an email and not send an email. It may mean lie down or keep practicing through the night. But the question to me is more, am I engaged in the process or am I waiting for someone else to do something? Which again, I'm not saying send an email or don't send an email. I'm just saying be in that struggle. Interesting. One of the residents a few months ago asked me, actually it was Sorya. Sorya asked me, how come you're so good at certain things that I'm really good at? And I thought about this over the years, and I thought maybe it's because I read a lot of books. Maybe I was just born this way, it's innate, genetic. Maybe it's I played these strategy games, so I'm really good at strategizing or something. Or maybe it's because when I was a kid, I had to work at my parents' dry cleaners by myself, and all these problems came up that I had to solve because there's no one else at the store besides me, and here was the supplier or the customer or vendor or whatever right in front of me waiting for me to do something, give them an answer, give them a response. And I just got a lot of repetitions in at a very young age, and was, slightly cursed, but also blessed to have that experience, because now I can be in those situations and it's not that big of a deal. And I think this is why I say college is useless, because for the most part, they don't throw people into that experience. I think everyone should have that experience of huge amount of responsibility, hopefully very low actual consequences, actual negative consequences, but actually a huge amount of responsibility and expectation of do something, practice something. Don't run away from the problem. Doesn't mean you act or don't act, but it does mean don't run away. And so at Maple, for example, we make people say the chant leader, and Sorya will grill the chant leader on the smallest things. You hesitated 1 microsecond. We all felt that microsecond. You are being a bad leader right now. You missed that drum for those 4 seconds. It threw us all off in chanting. You're a bad drummer. Do something about it. Of course, the point here isn't to shame anyone. No one wants to make people feel bad, but it's this artificial scenario where there's no actual real consequences besides people's feelings, which, change constantly anyway. But putting people in a position of being able to practice, what's it like to have responsibility, to have leadership, to be doing it wrong, to not know how to do it right, and keep going somehow. as a culture, it's really sad that I think most people never get this experience. And in fact, parents and teachers and society teaches people to never have this experience. Which is again why changing your career or moving or doing any of these things is so terrifying for most people. Because it is terrifying. It's not like it's not terrifying, but it doesn't have to be that huge of a deal for those of us who've had that experience. And now it's just, well, this sucks, but I know how to deal with this. So, I think I don't have a good answer for you because I'm not in your shoes. I don't have as much information as you. But I'm most glad that you're in that situation because you're getting the opportunity to be in, and it sounds like you actually chose yourself to be in a position of responsibility, of leadership, of action, whatever you end up doing. Whatever you end up doing, there will be consequences and feedback, and you'll learn from that. And that's great. That's great. I think that's great. What the actual nuts and bolts of what to do in that situation, people can write books about, and everyone will give you an opinion or something. But the more important thing is being in that dilemma, being in that struggle, and surviving, and actually staying in it. Then you've just grown as a leader. That's great. So I don't have a good answer for what you should actually do, and it doesn't sound like you're even asking for it. And B, I wouldn't want to rob you of the opportunity of being in that mess of not knowing, and then learning from life rather than some supposed expert or something who tells you the answer. I think that's great. I don't know if you want a more concrete answer, but
I don't know that there is a more concrete answer that you could really give me. I mean, I just think it's mostly the sort of feeling of I go into these situations and I keep experiencing that sort of dread with it, and I did recognize it as a situation where I could just play with it without actually having more responsibility or consequences than I need to or than I choose to.
Right.
So I think it was sort of deliberate as a way of potentially working through something like this. And I just recognize that I think my ultimate aim is to have enough inner freedom to either not be emotionally drawn in quite that way, or to be emotionally drawn in that way and still have some sort of sense of clear conscience about what I'm doing or something. But I think that's an evolution, and I don't necessarily expect to be at that point when I make the decision in this situation.
That's great. All of our experience is just part of the practice. It's not a way of practice. Jesus.
I just want to move it to the practice and the responsibility of the practice. And just as you were describing this situation, I was aware of the machine that continued to make the noxious sound throughout the meditation. And it ended right when we ended. Perfect. And I have a really hard time with that, and so I said, oh, okay, this is meant to be, or something like that. And so you can engage the same responsibility continually every microsecond of your meditation towards staying when you want to leave. you know, and when you want to judge. I want to judge the machine. I want to judge the experience of coming inside when it's beautiful outside, or I want to judge, you know, all of that, or and so it became a continual. Every second was the challenging me to stay present without being upset. And I was really grateful to do it. I mean, that it worked, that I did it. And so what does that mean? I stayed awake and no judgment and was just present. What was I present to? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's like, oh. So I'm thinking, okay, well, that's what we're supposed to do. What do you get to? You get to just practicing those micromanagements of your brain. And you're using your mind or your brain to control your mind or your brain. So it's pretty interesting. So that's what I think you say. That you move from the management to the management of the mind.
It's wonderful. I'm not really qualified to talk about this, but it reminds me of the Soto practice where they say, in Soto Zen they say, your meditation is enlightenment. Enlightenment is your meditation. And so, in terms of what are we practicing, what are we getting to, that being with, that being in is the awakening. And the awakening is the practice of being with. Yeah, that's really good. Seeing that everything that happens is at least interfacing through my mind. And I can have ownership and responsibility of everything in my mind. And not be the victim that has to wait for something outside to change for me to be alive. That's really powerful. Really wonderful practice. Did you have something?
I have a story, a short story. There was a blind carpenter, and he was asked by the congregation to restore the old temple, to renovate it. And he felt, they all know I'm blind. I can't even see the temple. But I know how to work with things, I can feel them, and I'm a carpenter. So how wonderful, an honor that they've honored me. I guess they want to try to help me, lift me up out of my blindness. So because they've appointed me, they've asked me, in good faith, I'm going to do my best. And I'm going to give thanks that they asked me. And so he picked up his hammer and saw. He saw. He not only picked up his hammer and saw, but he saw. He was blind. But because he picked up his hammer and was willing, in spite of his blindness, suddenly he saw his saw.
Very good. I think that'll do it. Thank you so much.